Kia ora koutou, Markie here. So what I'm trying to do at the moment is balance things out a little bit, because I do lots of videos on something called retroactive jealousy, and they're getting very popular, and more people are asking me to do more videos. But there's also a whole bunch of followers that I have that aren't remotely interested in retroactive jealousy, and why would you be? If you don't suffer from this horrible thing, then you don't need to be too concerned about it, really. So they're interested in some of the other things, some of the demystification. So I'm trying to balance things out, but I tend to go with the flow, so I can't just shoot a video if I'm not feeling it. So bear with me. I do care, and I am trying to kind of give you something so you don't feel left out. So what I want to talk about today is science. Big subject, but very specifically I want to talk about how science is reported. Picture, imagine this. You'd be familiar with this conversation, that takes place on buses and in offices and various places. Is somebody will say something like, cannabis is good for you, or tomatoes are good for you, or a glass of red wine a day is good for you, or poking yourself in the eye is good for you. No, don't poke yourself in the eye. And then somebody said, yes, but last year they were telling us it's bad for us, and the year before that they were telling us it was good for us, and then they were telling us it was bad for us, and then they were telling us it was good for us. So is it good for us or is it bad for us? It's crazy. What's going on here? Okay, so the problem is, the problem lies really mainly with the media. Okay, the media are one of the pillars of evil, I think. And this isn't to damn all the media, because the media do very important things, but there are, I don't think many people would argue there's some really bad shit that goes on from the media in lots of different ways, and particularly I've got one of my tangents here, but particularly body image stuff, airbrushed models and things like that just makes my blood boil. When you think about, not even teenage girls, but children that are worrying about their weight and their diet because they've looked at pictures in the magazines and things like that. They don't have this childish innocence. They're literally fretting about their weight. And it's not, obviously, all that kind of body image stuff doesn't apply just to women. It applies to men as well, increasingly to men, because men are being targeted more by media. But that is a tangent, okay? And maybe we'll do another video on that. Let me know if you want me to do another video on that, or maybe let me know if you don't want me to do another video on that. So science, why do they tell us, baked beans are good for you, baked beans are bad for you, baked beans are good for you, baked beans are bad for you, baked beans are good for you, baked beans are bad for you? It's because of the way research is reported in the press. Okay, so what the press do, so basically the way kind of scientists work is they do a piece of research, and then they publish the results in a paper which goes in certain scientific journals, okay? And people that are in that particular field will buy the journal for that field, and they look at the latest research that's available. And papers tend to have a certain format, so they begin with an abstract, which is kind of a summary, and then they look at the method and then conclusions and problems, and they state biases. So if the research is being conducted by the sugar industry or the tobacco industry or whatever, there might just be a bias there. So they're supposed to declare their biases and things like that. So there's a certain format that the paper comes out in, okay? And scientists publish these papers. Now, papers can be published by anything from a massive corporation to a PhD student living in a bedsit in Dorking. Okay, and these things are available. You can if you got the right kind of the access to academic journals, you can access a lot of these things online. So you can do searches for research on a particular subject. So you can look at kind of cancer in canaries, and you can kind of Google that, and you'll find research on. You might find research on cancer in canaries. You might not. So all these different scientific studies are kind of done by different people, different times, different countries, different places. They all kind of are aiming to kind of follow the scientific method, which is about where you have a hypothesis, you think something, you have a theory that, oh yeah, you know, maybe cancer in canaries is caused by millet or whatever. So we'll do research, try to see if it's caused by millet, and then they'll tell you how they did it, and they'll say, right, well we picked 1,000 red canaries and 1,000 green canaries. I don't know if you can get red and green canaries. I don't know anything about canaries. I need to look at the research, and then they'll kind of come to their conclusions. And the results, which might actually not be conclusive. The conclusions might not be conclusive because the outcome might be that the cancer rates in red and what did I say, green canaries is exactly the same, it's no different, blah blah blah. So you get my point. Okay, don't get lost in the canary example. Things are falling off now because I've improvised a phone stand, and it's not very good because I've left my phone stand at home and I kind of codged a Heath Robinson kind of phone stand together, so that's why things are falling out. So somebody dragged me back on topic. So what the press do is they trawl through these research papers and they look for recent ones, and they look for ones that are a bit kind of sensationalist, that are attention grabbing, populist. So they like to pick things that relate to a lot of people, like sort of things like alcohol. That's the kind of the classic one, you know. Is a glass of red wine every night good for you? They did say that it was good for you if you're over 40, or this kind of thing. And the way they report things is they don't report them with any sense of kind of discrimination or critical analysis. So they oversimplify it and they say scientists have proved, that's a word they shouldn't use. Okay, they've proved that it's good for you to eat feathers on a Wednesday. Okay. Now, if you were to do the homework and look into that story, then you'd find that maybe a small team of scientists in Denmark did some research and they concluded that on a trial that 6 out of 10 people that ate feathers on a Wednesday had some health benefits. Okay, so that already it's starting to sound a little bit less less definitive, less definite. Then you look at how they did the research. Okay, so in terms of research, some research is done on a massive scale because they get lots of funding and it's very good research. Some research is done on a tiny scale. Okay, so if in 1980 somebody does some research on whether alcohol is a glass of wine a day is good for you or bad for you, they might have based their studies on 10 people. Okay, and then another study that comes along a year later bases the study on 1,000 people, and then another study that comes along the next year might base it on around about the same number of people, but their methods might be subject to criticism. The methods might not be actually that good. And in those papers, often the people that produce papers will actually criticise themselves. They'll talk about the failings and the challenges of their research. And sometimes they'll say, well, while the majority of people that we surveyed did present with this result, some of the problems that we had is that there are other variables, there are other things going on, because some of these people eat cheese, and some of these people have armadillos for pets, and we think having armadillos and eating cheese might have a bearing and might throw out the results. So, cut a long story short, when somebody produces a research paper which indicates something, it doesn't mean it's been proven. Okay, it just means that the research that was done by the certain people with a certain time using a certain method and a certain number of people, which will to some degree be imperfect, has come up with a certain result. That result is then exaggerated by the press. The press say it's proven, and it sells more newspapers and it gets people talking, but it doesn't actually do any of this any good because it spreads misinformation, and also it creates confusion, and it creates a lack of confidence in the scientific profession, because we think, oh, these bloody boffins don't know what they're talking about. 1 minute they say this, 1 minute they say that. What can't they make their bleeding minds up? Okay, so just when you see these, if you're really interested in what the headline says, then see if you can get hold of the paper. You know, read the paper. And also the other thing that happens is these things are peer reviewed. So if a scientist produces a paper, it goes in a journal. It doesn't just kind of, it doesn't just kind of sit there. Is other scientists will look at the research and they will give praise and criticism. You know, so a piece of research that proves that a glass of wine a day is good for you could have been torn apart by the rest of the scientific community. But if their paper says a glass of wine is good for you, you know, every day when you're over 40, that's what will be reported by the press, and you know, the general public, as the mugs that we are, will go and drink a glass of wine every evening thinking it's doing us good, when it may or may not be. You know, as to whether a glass of wine every night or once a day when you're over 40, oh, sorry about that, that's my phone message, that's very unprofessional of me, isn't it? As to whether that is the case, I got no idea, I don't know. Go and look at the papers. And on that note, I rang Markie. And when I say the papers, I mean scientific papers, not the newspapers. Okay, take care.